Right then, running a little bit late by about a minute, but we are up and running. I'm also going to make the Facebook post public as well, which means if you do want to jump in and make any comments on that particular stream, you're more than welcome to do so. In fact, that's where I've a little bit of a reverb there, so there we go. This is going out on all the platforms as always, so any comments that come in should come through to my comments field here on the controller page. Anything that you want to bring up in conversation, please do let us know, because this is, as always, your show. It's all about your take on the topics at hand, and we'll get into certainly my thoughts on it, and but we want to hear about yours as well, so please do jump in on the comments. We are going to try and moderate comments as well, so if we can, please keep things civil and grown up, if you wouldn't mind, please. But we're going to try and get into some pretty serious topics today, so I hope you're up for an interesting conversation. As always, thank you very much indeed to our Patreon supporters. I am going to put the list up at the end of the show because I haven't gotten time to put it up on screen right now, but I want to show all thanks and really do show my appreciation to everyone who goes to patreon.com/Englishman SDCC. They allow us to keep doing what we do, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much indeed. Right, what else? I bought comics today, and I think that's really the only important thing, because I bought comics. It's Wednesday, it's New Comics Book Day, and I'm a happy bunny in that regard, so that's cool. But we've got ourselves a fair audience in. We've got some people who are joining in on the comments. Thank you very much indeed for coming along. Let's get the ball rolling, shall we? I've got to admit, I still do like my opening credits, and I do like the fact that Jeff was watching in the background. He was smiling away quite happily at that. And when I actually have had guests come on and they've seen the new opening credits, it's great that they've kind of looked at Comic-Cons and things that have happened over the summer, and they get good memories of it. Admittedly, there's that slight tinge of sadness as we miss the events that we haven't been able to go to this year. But yeah, it's great that people are responding well to those new opening credits. To Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. My name's Leonard Sultana, and this is the show where we talk Comic-Cons, con culture, and all the stuff and nonsense that we get to enjoy at such events. Now, we usually run the show on a Sunday, and indeed this weekend I'm looking forward to talking to James Tinnan IV, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. Please do join us for that. But every once in a while we get the chance to run these incidental episodes, these drop-in one-offs, which allow us to talk to some great guests, either about upcoming Kickstarters or projects they've got going. Maybe it's just a guest that isn't able to join us within the Sunday confines. This next guest is somebody that I reached out to. We've been mutuals on Twitter for some time. He's certainly somebody who is known in the comics landscape. But I wanted to preface the conversation certainly with a little bit of, not a disclaimer, but just my kind of lay of the land. This is a conversation about the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. And the reason why I wanted to preface it is, at the end of the day, I have represented the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. While I haven't been a card-carrying member, in 2018, they hosted a number of panels at the MCM Comic Con in London. And as MCM and Repop were organising and coordinating with the Comic Book Legal Defence Fund about putting the panels on, my name came up as the host for the comic stage of that particular year. The Comic Book Legal Defence Fund reached back and said, yep, Leonard can host those. He's good people. That was the quote that was sent out. Now, I took that as a very big endorsement of what I do. While I understand my place in the firmament, I understand my place in the pecking order. It was some validation for the things that I do on my side of the fence. This year has been a tumultuous year for a great many reasons, in terms of social and political and health, and it's just been a hell of a year. As part of that, the comics industry was put into a major set of upheaval in terms of its business strategy, and also some revelations that came out regarding the behaviour of staff of the Cbldf. This is a conversation about those revelations, about the past of the Cbldf, its present, and hopefully its future. We have ourselves Jeff Draxler, who's joining us. Hello there, sir. How are you?
Hi. It's good to see you. Good to hear you. I'm glad to be part of the podcast.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Also to explain when the announcement was put forward that you are the Interim Director of the Cbldf. I kind of reached out and said I'm surprised that more podcasts or more people haven't reached out to you for interviews, which I hadn't actually seen out there. So I was a bit surprised that people hadn't talked to you. So I thought I'd put my face out there, not expecting you to say yes, but here you are. So thank you very much indeed for coming on. I think first things first, let's explain who you are. If you can give yourself a little bit of an introduction, please. Who is Jeff Draxler, please?
Great. Some of you may know me from the work that I've been doing on various websites, the Newsarama, The Beat, comicsbeat.com, tcj.com, writing about legal issues. I've been doing that for the community since about 2005. My own background is I'm an attorney. I started out working with nonprofit organizations and also working with ethics issues. It's been the focus of my career. It's why I went to law school. I came to it from a PhD program. I had a PhD in religious history at Duke, where I studied ethics music, and I got fascinated by nonprofits and how they work and how their missions work and how it changes over time and how they interact with their constituencies. So from law school, I went on. I did work in Russia, devising the new nonprofit laws that I think have largely been undone in recent years, but in the early 90s, we did a lot of good things. And in 2005, I've been a comics fan all of my life. I've been reading about the industry all of my life, in Comics Buyer's Guide and various books. And I had hit a point with the Siegel and Schuster lawsuits where the dispute over Superman, where I was seeing, a few too many articles about the trademark and the copyright and the patent that were sort of jumbling those concepts together. So I decided to start writing about this on my personal website. It quickly got picked up by other websites. And it's been a wonderful time, because helping the legal community helping the comics community over the past 15 years deal with legal issues has really been one of the highlights of my life, because I've gotten so much out of comics. It's shaped how I see the world in so many ways, and I've met so many interesting people in the comics community. So after helping very quietly, trying to help creators where I can, and publishers and people in journalists and people in the industry, to have an opportunity to do it in a more systematic way through the Cbldf is something that I welcome, and I look forward to. I look forward to a lot of good things over the next few months.
When it comes to your relationship then with the Cbldf, you obviously you'd written about them, you knew about what their remit was, but I'm curious about your actual relationship with the actual organization. Who approached who when it came to putting your name forward as the directorship? How did that all come about?
Well, you had your own disclaimer at the beginning of the thing, so I will give mine. I have participated in a Cbldf event back in 1996 in Venice, California, talking about sales tax. When an attorney visited to talk about what they were doing. I was a tax lawyer, but if you did nonprofits, you pretty much automatically slotted into the tax thing. I was working for a federal judge at the time. So that was 24 years ago, and all I was a member of the audience, not a member of the panel. So from there, I haven't been involved in the Cbldf, and I've watched it and I've written about it. I think in Comics Journal and Comics Beat, I've written some articles about how I think the mission should be changing over time, but I have not been part of the organization. What drew me to it was actually this particular issue, and I'll tell you why. I've been working, and I can talk about more about this if you want, but I've been trying to help change the legal strategies and legal approach with respect to sexual harassment for the past couple of decades. I just encountered some really bad things when trying to help some people back around 20 years ago, and I saw that the system was broken. So for the past decade, I've been doing this through the Fashion Law Institute at Fordham School of Law, where we have been working with ways to, we helped co-found the Model Alliance, which has been working with models and with industry to stop sexual harassment of models. One of my ethics students, formed the Humans of Fashion Foundation, which refers people throughout the fashion industry, models, cosmetics workers, whoever, to lawyers and also to psychiatric assistants. And I've been advising Caring, which is a major international corporation, it's parent company of such companies as Gucci and Balenciaga, on ethics. I've been their outside ethics advisor for a number of years, and have also conducted training. So it's been a concern of mine. And when I saw that the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund was going through this summer, I reached out to them and said, it just so happens I have this experience. This is something where I've been able to do a lot of work, also with governments actually reforming the law, which I'm happy to talk about, over the past few years. And if you could use any help in making the transition so that the next executive director, who will be there longer term, will have a strong foundation, new ethics policies, new procedures that are the cutting edge, sort of the best practices for the current age, then I'm happy to do that.
Fair enough. Also, just to backtrack for those people who are watching that maybe you watch this show for Comic-Con news, who may not be aware fully of what the Cbldf is. It's a organization, it's a non-profit organization formed in 1986 to protect the First Amendment rights of comic creators, publishers and retailers, covering legal expenses. Executive Director Charles Brownstein served in that capacity since 2002 until his resignation. Just to bring some context as well in terms of a timeline, especially considering what was revealed, what came out this year. And I think part of the big conversation of what I want to bring into is, and it's something that I have talked about a number of times on the podcast, is the fact that this is a long-term event. It's something that, while came to a head in 2020, this is all off the back of an event that took place at the Mid-Ohio Con in November 25th, 2005, an incident of physical assault of sexual nature with Taki Soma by Charles Brownstein. In December 26th of the same year, Renee Garcia-Bourgeois of the Friends of Lulu post on her blog about the incident. In May 2006, after investigation, the Comics Journal posted its findings about Charles Brownstein, and indeed there was a response from the Cbldf. Certain allegations were brought back to the fund's attention. The board of directors had been dealing with the issue since the day after the incident and has taken the matter very seriously. The board retained an outside investigator to conduct a thorough independent investigation, which has been concluded. Appropriate actions have been taken based on the results of the investigation, but to protect the privacy rights of all parties involved, we cannot comment further. That was May 2006. 2018, the Comics Journal reprinted the 2006 article, which led to the foundation of the Women's Empowerment Fund. In 2020, however, the post was resurrected as part of an ongoing conversation about sexual harassment in the industry, certainly in regards to a number of incidents of a number of people, not necessarily just Charles Brownstein, but Charles Brownstein's name came up, the articles were resurrected, and in 2020, in June 2020, Charles Brownstein stepped down. I think the thing. I mean, there's several things I want to get into, and we've kind of talked about the headings in which we want to get into the whole thing, and I think we'll start with. Well, I want to jump forward. I want to talk about that whole revelations that came forward and how it was handled. But let's actually talk about a little bit further about the continued operation of the Cbldf, because I think there are many people that feel that the damage that has been done to the Cbldf is too great. It's sustained too long over a period of time, outweighing the good that has been done. What's your view on this, and how do you feel the organization can recover moving forward?
Mm-hmm. This is something that I've thought about even before. It's an issue I've thought about even before the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, because if you've worked in this area as long as I have, you've seen a lot of things. You've seen a lot of things with whether it's nonprofits, small and large, companies, small and large. And part of the reason why I do what I do and why I've spent so much of my career doing this, a lot of it admittedly behind the scenes, some of it occasionally, the recordings out there of me doing public testimony for New York City on harassment law changes, is that the system, like I said, is broken. And there is a normal way that this has been handled for many, many years. And I encountered this when the very first case that I had on this, when there were some women who approached and had some issues, so went to counsel, and the counsel did not react like I thought. I thought the counsel would say, "Oh, well, okay, we'll have this is a credible story, well documented. We'll have an investigation. We'll get rid of this person, and these people, the complainants, will be taken care of." Instead, the lawyer, leans back and says, "Well, Jeff, as a lawyer, you know that my fiduciary duty is to the corporation, and it's in the best interest of the corporation that people who bring this complaint are removed." And I found out that the way they handled this, as a matter of course, was whoever brought a credible complaint, was removed from the organization, and the person who did it, despite being something of a recidivist, so doing it again and again and again, was just got a slap on the wrist and then could keep going because that was their person. That's the person they hired to do that job. And I realized that this was not just one organization, it was many organizations. I happened to be visiting the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission when the women came in for the first class action lawsuit against Walmart on sexual harassment. This is a long time ago. And I learned there's company after company where women had encountered this, where men had encountered it, non-binary people, trans people, everybody is encountering this issue when they are making these complaints. So I have thought long and hard. There have been some long nights of the soul on this one. And one thing I realized was that there are a number of large corporations who have baked this into their business model. And so every day you go out there and there are grocery stores, restaurants, banks, entertainment companies that you do not know that what you have heard about with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund in several occasions, we're talking about dozens. When you multiply it over the large companies, we're talking about thousands of interactions like this over the years. And you don't know it, and it just gets to continue because large organizations, it's very, very difficult to make a difference. I've been fortunate to work with some where they brought me in specifically as an outside voice to make those changes and to make sure that everything is going well, but those are the exceptions to the rule. So it's a small organization, yes, a small organization. You can identify the person, you can close it, you can send the money somewhere else, but over time, you're going to get an environment where it's just the large organizations left. It's the small organizations where one person can come in and make a large difference. So that's why I do this. I thought I thought a lot about this before working with this Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, before offering to do what I'm going to do. But I don't think, just as I don't think it's fair that people go through the horrors of this, and I don't, I get people who say that these organizations should continue, because I think that about a number of companies that you probably do business with every day, but they're not going away. So I'm going to do what I can so that the good of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund can live on, and we can help the comics community for the future.
Sure. I think for myself, it's the. I mean, I personally believe that there is a place for the organisation of the Comics Book Legal Defence Fund, as well as there is for Hero Initiative. Basically, any support that comic creators can get financially, legally, in any corner at all. I think. I mean, I believe that there is more than enough space for those, because there is no support system for creators in the comics industry. It's such a, we've discovered this in this year, that it's such a fragile ecosystem that any support at all really should be encouraged and move forward. Which is why the conversation about the continued operation, whether it should be dismantled, whether the harm that's been done outweighs the good that it already has in its cachet. It's a difficult conversation to have, because we need as many organizations as we can to support the creators moving forward. I think that also, oh yeah, by all means, go.
Can I add something with respect to that? Because it comes back to something you said in the introduction, when you said that the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund exists to help creators with First Amendment issues. I don't know if the post is up yet. I know that it was scheduled to go up. They're working on putting it up sometimes today. But I actually just did a post for our website on that very issue, on how I see the mission. I don't believe, now again, and I'm going to, as I say in the post, this is Jeff Draxler speaking. This is not the official position of anybody. This is just me. People know that this is what I think, but this is not an official sort of directive of anything yet. But I've spent a lot of time in the mission ever since I've heard that the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund could only do certain narrow things that are connected to the First Amendment. Because remember, my only interaction with it in terms of public events was a sales tax issue. And I don't believe, as a nonprofit attorney, that that is correct. I believe that its charter and its ethos, sort of the core concerns that the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund has had since its founding, it's concerned with helping the comics community with legal issues, with legal rights, and that goes beyond the legal rights associated with free speech, free press, access to comics and the comics industry. They go beyond the First Amendment. Remember, the Supreme Court has described intellectual property as a constitutional right. Contracts are protected by the Constitution, and equal access to contracts is the heart of civil rights. So civil rights, in fact, if you look at the first civil rights law in 1866, it's about protecting everybody's right to contract so that you can't be discriminated against. So I believe part of what we can do going forward is to recover the mission, to reboot it. The metaphor I've been using throughout is we want to reboot the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. This isn't about changing the mission or expanding the mission. This is about recapturing what the mission originally was and expressing it to the fullest for the needs of the contemporary time. So you mentioned Hero Initiative and other charities that are doing a lot to help creators who have, in the comics industry, they've suffered a lot financially. Sure. And I think that is important. And my approach to the nonprofit world is there's room for a lot of nonprofits, and people definitely should support the Hero Initiative and other organizations that are helping creators in need. We also are going to be helping creators in need. And just as it's important that there is economic help available, economic assistance available to creators who've fallen into poverty, what we want to do at the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund is help creators avoid that fate. Give them the legal tools so that they can approach their contracts more intelligently, so that they know what they're getting into and they know what to avoid, so they can lead better lives and not need that kind of assistance when they get older. Sure.
In terms of where we've seen 2020 happen, it has been, like I said in my intro, a tumultuous year, and we've seen corporate layoffs, we've seen conventions cancelled, titles cancelled, the rise of the bookstore trade, the slow death of the direct sales market, and how Diamond has evolved and had to change, and other distributors, and all sorts of legal issues regarding the evolvement, the evolution, the rapid evolution of the industry in 2020. where do you see the Cbldf having a future in that regard, in that industry which has been so negatively affected by recent events?
Mm-hmm. This is, and coming at it from fashion, it's been very incredibly helpful for me to see a different industry, and an industry that's going through its own seismic shifts. This is a time when, despite what's happening at the largest scale in terms of the comics industry, like in fashion, there's still a lot of people who love the medium. They want to tell stories, they want to make clothes, and there's an intersection. I've done a bunch of work with geek fashion, and there's an intersection in terms of licensed products and merchandise and people wanting to cross between the two. That will not go away. And what historically, when you go through a process like this, where there's a lot of churn, where people are rethinking the infrastructure of the industry, that's the time where there's an incredible amount of opportunity to do something new, to build new structures, to create new properties, to do business in a different way. And you think about it. I got started writing about in comics, writing about the Siegel and Schuster cases. When was Superman created? At the height of the Great Depression. When you have this kind of economic restructuring, that's when you need to know the law even more than ever. So not just in order to understand what's given to you, so that maybe you can even help create new legal structures, so that everybody involved in a transaction can benefit from them in a way that's more equitable, more fair. So there's a tremendous need for us now, and I want to help meet that need for the comics community.
Okay. I'm going to skip forward to the transparency element of what I was going to bring up. We'll move to the actual remit of the organization a little bit later, because I think possibly the biggest and most important aspect of the conversation will be how the Cbldf can and should change and evolve in order to be serviced in the future. And this also does include greater transparency in terms of any issues and complaints in the future. Just to clarify about Charles Brownstein and about the actual organization as well, we have the board of directors, but the actual operation of the Cbldf, as far as I'm aware and from my conversations with people, is it's actually a very small organization, in that when charges and accusations and conversations about Charles Brownstein were brought up, it was effectively Charles Brownstein that was handling the internal investigation, as it were. Was that accurate? Was that the case? And what was the kind of the buffer in terms of the accusations going forward? What was the actual organization at that time?
There's a way that these things are traditionally done, and this is what I think a lot of people may not understand, just in terms of the way sexual harassment has been handled. So I'll explain some of it. I know it was really new to me when I got into it, because frankly, I thought the system was a lot more fair than it turned out to be. But the way these things are typically handled is complaint will come in. It's done internally, and that whole system, which is something that people think it arose in the 1970s, it actually went back decades before, largely connected with the fashion trade, actually, when women and others in unions were trying to come up with a system so that you could have third parties investigate complaints of sexual harassment and discipline people and remove people in factories who were exploiting them. And what evolved out of that was a system that's basically rigged, where it was all done internally. And maybe you'd hire people to do it, but the people who tended to get hired were the people who were coming up with results that are more favorable to corporations. So the system, there's not a lot to trust about it. So one of the things that I want to do with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund is what I've been doing outside of the fund, which is coming up with ways for the checks and balances to have checks and balances. I want to get outside eyes on things, so that if we have a complaint that comes through again, then whether it's about somebody in the organization, or say somebody's experienced something in the comics industry and they want to have help. They went to a convention and they went to an editor, and the editor hit on them and said, come to my hotel room and do this. How do I handle this? Well, we want to be able to have a system so that these things can be investigated in a credible way, and that the investigation itself and the results of the investigation and any discipline that results from it can have other people looking at it and express their voice in terms of whether they think it was a credible one or not a credible one, whether something else needs to be done. Those are the kind of structures we've been talking about since before I was brought on board, that this is what we want to do. This is what we have to do. In fact, if there was an openness to that, I wouldn't be here, because that's the only way I was going to be a part of it, is if that kind of approach was going to be taken. I apologize. I just been getting some text, so I thought I had that silence. But
it's like I can imagine that your communication has been ringing left, right, and centre pretty much ever since that you took on the job. I think something that maybe people don't recognise is just how pervasive the abuse that Charles Brownstein did. It wasn't just one event. It wasn't just one person. There were various members of the C.B.L.D.F team, especially numbers of people that did work at the conventions, which kind of where I came into the conversation, doing work on the convention circuit. People who had been emotionally and sexually harassed and intimidated to the point where non-disclosure forms were filled, agreements were broken, and it's a pervasive thing. And the fact that it was such over a period of prolonged time is the thing that's really certainly rankled with myself. And I think also a lot of people are very concerned about the fact that members of the executive board and advisory board were made aware of these accusations. They were contacted independently by the employees, by the people that had been abused, and the question whether they served any influence on Charles not being removed is a big question. Where's that currently standing in terms of the current board of advisory, the advisory board and the executive board?
Yeah, there's a way things have been done. Part of the way I say this is, I think I mentioned I went to Yale Law School, and there's some news. I don't know if you've been following the news at Yale Law School, but there's a professor there that there have been a number of complaints about for years by students. A very, very powerful professor who can determine, in many ways, people's careers in terms of who he recommends for what. And today they announced that there was finally some disciplinary actions after, of course, an independent investigation. And the whole disciplinary action is he gets to take off for 2 years. You know, that's the disciplinary action, that he doesn't get to teach for 2 years. And then when he comes back, he'll be teaching large classes as opposed to small ones. And for me, it was a bit of a symbol of the way this is often handled in nonprofits, universities, for-profit companies, where what you do is you delegate it to somebody. That person comes up with a recommendation. The recommendation is often some kind of discipline that they may think is harsh, but to anybody else watching it just seems kind of ridiculous. And particularly when you stack it up against all the people somebody has hurt, and the credibility of the organization goes down even further as a result of the investigation. I've seen this play out again and again and again. So when you talk about what happened with the board, I wasn't there, obviously, so I don't know who knew what when, because that a lot of those things, conversations to which I was not privy. But what I can say, based on what I've seen so far, is it looks like it followed this pattern. It's that you hear a complaint, you refer it out to somebody to investigate, they make a recommendation, and that's the way things have been done for decades, for a long, long, long time. So it's a systemic thing. It's not so much a personal thing with any one individual. It's just the way that if you're a lawyer, you were trained by your senior partners that this is how you handle this thing. This is not the way I like to see things done. This is what I've been trying to change in various companies and working with lawyers and changing the systems and even changing the law. But whatever happened in the past, I am determined will not happen again. if I have anything to do with it. We're going to set up a way of dealing with these things that is transparent, that has a number of different eyes looking at it to make sure that it's just not a closed system. And so that when we do encounter this, there will be a number of opportunities in the system for the complainant to express dissatisfaction with the way it's being handled, as well as outside people who are not part of the CBLDF to say, hey, actually, you need to be taking this more seriously.
Sure. We've got a question from Michael P, but like I say, we're taking questions. Do please, any comments that you want to put in, by all means, do let us know. I mean, number one, we've got Bitspitter, who's a long-time fan of the show. Got all work, but so can't keep watching. But it sounds like Cbldf is in very good hands now. So there we go. Comment for yourself. But Michael P brings up a question which I was going to ask, and it's a fairly, I'll dovetail into it. Basically asking, how will the board be held accountable in the future? The previous board did not do their job. From what I can gather, the board is very much an advisory bunch of a collective of people, in that in the actual organization of the running of the organization, they weren't necessarily as part of that day-to-day operation. Mm-hmm. It was more about the advisory about any legal cases going forward, any judgment calls going forward. But I mean, the question I would like to ask is, have you been in contact with the board and found out, basically asked them what they knew and what they didn't? Mm-hmm. Or is that outside of your remit, as it were?
No. I've been given access to documents, to internal material, basically unfettered. So I can see the way things have been unfolding in real time. I've had conversations with board members. And so I've been trying to investigate as much as I can. Remember, one of the first things you do when you're a young attorney is due diligence. That's the first year they basically, if you do transactional work, they stick you in rooms. That's changed a little bit because a lot of it's done by computers now and AI. But for me, I would be stuck in rooms with giant cabinets of decades of documents, and I'd have to read every one, look for legal problems. So my first impulse when I take something on is to read as much as I can and talk to as many people as I can to find out everything that went on. Because remember, as I'm a historian before I became a lawyer, and the best way to avoid things happening is to understand what happened even better than anyone has before. So I am determined. I've been thinking about the structure, and what we're going to be doing is twofold. One, you've mentioned several times about the organization almost being synonymous with the executive director, but I think that's I think the description's correct, but I think as a rule for running organizations, that's not the way organizations should be run. The rudder should not be the ship. They're not the same thing. What you should have is an organization, and here it's going to sound a little bit wonky, and I try not to like this, but it just works for me in terms of systems. I'm trying to take a distributed approach to it, so that we have a number of wonderful staff people who've been amazing since I've come on board. We talk a lot. We talk about a lot about what they're going to be doing, and the idea is that they will be, or they are doing right now, work that they're very talented, they're very good at, that is connected with our mission, and is actually going to be even doing more things than we have been doing in the past few years, sort of living our mission out to the fullest. And over time, we'll bring in a new executive director for a longer term. I'm just here temporarily. And my first conversation with them, I said, I will not take this job for a longer period of time. I am only here temporarily because I think it's crucial for what I want to do, that there's no sense that I'm trying to curry favor with somebody to keep a job, or that I have some sort of self-interest in no. I am here to do one thing, and that's to make the Cbldf better for the longer term, and then they're going to bring on somebody longer term, and that's it. So, but key to that, the only way that's going to work is if we have a staff that has a lot more power and a lot more responsibility than they had when I came in. And so we're working on that right now. We have an agenda. We're doing various projects. I know a lot of it's me right now, but you'll be seeing them very, very soon as they talk about our wonderful educational initiatives, member initiatives, legal cases, everything so on down the line.
Sure.
The other part
question.
of that, so we were talking about.
Go ahead.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to talk about was information, because what did the board know? I guarantee you, because again, I've worked with companies for decades now, most boards of directors don't know what's going on in their organizations in terms of sexual harassment. A board of organization exists to set the general policy, and then the day-to-day operations are run by the employees. And in larger companies, you'll have a vice president of human resources, and then various people under the vice president and various people they subcontract to. Information filters out, and quite frankly, employee discipline and sexual harassment is not seen as a priority by most companies. It's just not something that the board's thinking about, unless maybe it touches the CEO has had an affair with somebody and it affects the business, and as we're seeing now in several studios. But in terms of everyday, manager here in some city, that's just not something that's thought about. So what I want to do is create a system where that corrects for that. So we're going to increase our reporting, the scope of our reporting, the kind of reporting we do on a quarterly and an annual basis internally, but we're also going to set up external reports, which you see. And in terms of the information flow, most board members, they don't want to hear most board members of any organization are on several boards, they're running their own companies, they don't have time to do what a full-time employee can do. So what we're going to do is use technology to our advantage. We've already started digitizing all of our records. We're going to have all of our records digital and accessible in real time, so that if a board sees something in a report where it says that looks like an issue, or if they just want to check in from time to time, they can access all of the information that's available to the full-time employees, to the staff, so that they know what's going on, and so that if they have any concerns, they can get that information and respond to it if they feel like a manager is not doing their jobs effectively as they could be, particularly in terms of ethics. So we have, again, multiple ways set up to do that, and taking advantage of contemporary information technology is going to be part of it.
Fair enough. I think it's safe to say that the day-to-day operations of the fund can't rest solely in the hands of one individual. And like you say, you're going to be implementing more on the team that you have to hand. Omar Hassa's asked a question. I'm going to kind of dovetail into it. What safeguards are you planning to put in place so that consolidation of power and authority will no longer reside in the hands of a single individual who controls the flow of information in both directions? And indeed, the question from Omar Hassa is, would you consider employing an outside panel review to rule on what if the board is doing? Hang on a second. Would you consider employing an outside panel review panel to rule on if what the board is doing is not out of line? So I think basically just that. Yeah.
I am, because it's what I've been doing for years before even coming to the Common Book Legal Defense Fund, helping organizations, helping companies as an outside voice, telling them this is what I think should be done, this is what isn't being done well, this is a problem in the works, this is an ethics issue nobody's thinking about yet. This is what I do. This is my career. I'm very concerned about this issue. So what I want to do is bring that same sensibility and the same best practices to the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. So am I in favor of having an outside committee, outside voices, taking a look at the board and providing kind of a Jiminy Cricket, conscience role? Yeah, certainly, because it's what I do. It's what I've done for years in fashion and other industries, and I think it has to be done here at the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund because of its prominence in the comics community, and I hope it can be a model for other organizations going forward. So yeah, certainly, no question. That is absolutely crucial.
Fair enough. I'm looking through my notes because I want to make sure that I hit as many points as we can, because I do want to try and get into. I don't want to disrespect the difficulties that people have gone through, such as Takisoma and various others. So I want to make sure that I have some notes to hand. This is also off the back of, I've been speaking to a couple of other people who have put forward questions, and this was one which I'm wondering where this comes under your remit, certainly, as you say, the interim director. How does the CBLDF, that's always going to trip me up, plan to foster a culture of inclusivity and diversity?
Mm-hmm. Diversification is another thing that I have emphasized from my first outreach to the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, and it also factored into my decision not to want to be considered and to absolutely refuse to take the longer-term position if it were offered to me. And it's this. Diversification is essential. The comic book industry has, from its beginning, been a place where people from all backgrounds ideally should be able to come in. People who are traditionally seen as outsiders have been able to come in various ways over the years. To varying degrees, it's not perfect, but it has been a place where it's held this appeal as a place where people who are sort of on the outside of society, who are marginalized in society, can find a voice. Again, the comics industry has, it's not perfect, it's had a lot of problems, but you can see people from various backgrounds trying to use it, trying to express themselves in it for many, many, many years. So I think it's only right for a community that, for an industry and a community that is defined by participation and has such a universal appeal, to have that diversity reflected in its organizations. I'm doing this because, for now, for a temporary period, because this just happens to be what I do. I mean, this is why I went into law, nonprofit management, and ethics. If I didn't have this background, I wouldn't have suggested myself for this temporary position, for this very short-term position. But I think that they definitely need to diversify all across the board, whether it's in terms of member involvement and making sure that even people who aren't part of staff have a greater voice. Everybody needs to have a voice in this organization, whatever their background, whatever their interests, all the way up through the board of directors. So 100% in agreement with the importance of diversification. I have strongly recommended that to the board. And I'm going to continue to do so.
Fair enough. In talking about the remit of the organization, then, I've been approached by a number of people to discuss a number of the various cases that the Cbldf have taken on and what jurisdiction they feel they actually serve, as well as what supporters of the organization feel that the organization need to weigh in and indeed perhaps actively avoid. At what point has protecting the First Amendment come at the expense of the actual men and women of the comics industry, and how can that ship be righted?
Mm-hmm. One way I think is the way that I address in the post that I hope, again, I do apologize because I know a number of you are making comments, and I would love to see them, but I didn't want to open a YouTube window and turn this off and mess it up. So I hope you don't
understandable
that I can't see that. But now I got talking about YouTube and I lost my train of thought. So if you could repeat that again, then I can do that.
Basically about how the
remit.
Role of the remit of the organization, and how it's sometimes the protecting the First Amendment has come at the expense of the men and women of the comics industry.
One way I talk about in that post that it either just came out or will come out or very, very soon. And I think that, law is very specialized in terms of what lawyers tend to handle. I tend to be a bit of a generalist. It comes with being a nonprofit person. But so a First Amendment person will handle, a litigator will handle a very small set of cases. Somebody in employment law will handle a very small set of cases within employment law, unless they're an in-house counsel or VP and HR. So everything tends to be narrow. And I think what's happened over the years is, at least in terms of the general pattern, what's happened with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, it has tended to follow the narrowness of legal practice itself. So it only does a certain type of First Amendment case, as if we were traditional First Amendment lawyers entering the business in like 1982 or something, which is a very narrow type of approach compared to the way even civil rights and First Amendment is seen today. I think we need to reboot that. I think we need to get back to the original expansive vision. And I think it is, in terms of the way things have been hurt, I think one of the biggest ways people have been hurt is they've come to the Legal Defense Fund for help. They said, you're the Legal Defense Fund. You're here to help us with various legal issues with our legal rights. And then you're saying you won't help us. I think that has been a problem. I think another issue with respect to it, and this is something I'm very sensitive to, and I know there's some people out there, even in comics, who've known me since the 1980s, and know that I am, for somebody who reads a lot of comics. I love my Grant Morrison, all that stuff, and I read some things that are sort of way out there in terms of psychedelia or whatever. I have a very boring life. I am incredibly boring, incredibly dull. I don't do anything in terms of my own personal life that anyone would find particularly interesting. And part of that's deliberate, because I feel like if you're going to be trying to help people have greater access to things, if you're trying to help people with freedom, you don't want to have it look like you're out there just trying to get freedom to do certain things yourself. So it just helps build trust in what you do. And I think in the First Amendment, there are several different types of people who go for First Amendment work. And there's sort of the First Amendment work who believe in principle that we have to have diverse voices. We don't want to lose voices because they're being left out. And I get that, and I respect that. And there are other people who are all about freedom because they just like to be free, to do certain things without constraint. I don't, to the extent that has been what we're associated with, I think we got to move past that. One of the things, and I told you I have a background in religious history, and one of the things we encounter again and again in religious history is people have ethical concerns. They want to do good in a particular way. They want to help communities, and in the end, they do things that hurt those communities. That is a recurring pattern. Free speech, that may have happened to a certain degree in some ways, but it's not the first time it's happened, and it won't be the last. But I want to do whatever we can to make sure it doesn't happen again on our watch.
Fair enough. I'm also really curious, and you have kept mentioning that this is an interim position for yourself. You're not taking it on as a long-term position. I'm curious how much you can do in the time that you have allocated yourself as the interim board director, and how you can put something in place from the position that you are coming at, from what you've described to us, and how that can hold once you step away from the position.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It has to do with institution building. This is something that, I come from Amish country. My Pennsylvania Dutch family for years. This is a land of farm building. This is about you're very focused on infrastructure, making things happen. Community and infrastructure, very, very key to me. So the only way this can work is if we have, one thing that's great, and I'm so relieved about since starting in, is we have a fantastic team. And that's part of the battle, having people you trust who can do the work and who are enthusiastic and committed to doing even more than has been done before. We have that team in place, and I look forward to working with them to making a lot of good things happen over the next few months. I think without that, the challenge would be even greater than it normally would be. So if we have people who are doing things, and they've been doing these things repeatedly, they have been engaged in certain projects, they've built certain things, so we have that institutional inertia, it then gets harder for one person to come in and take complete control. It becomes harder for a person to come in and just say, well, I'm getting rid of all these people and I'm just going to do it myself, because you get rid of the people, the things don't get done. And you also will have people who I think will come to be better known to the comics community, and it will raise some questions if those people are suddenly made to disappear. A director, an executive director, interim or otherwise, is not, a nonprofit Thanos. Shouldn't be a nonprofit Thanos, definitely. They can't make the board disappear. They shouldn't be able to make staff disappear. And I feel like the more we are doing in as short a time as possible, the greater the likelihood we will not repeat the mistakes of the past.
Okay. The section I want to move on to next is the one which, for myself, I feel, while I said that transparency would be for many the most important part of the conversation, for myself, this is the big focus of the conversation, seeing as the hurt and abuse that has suffered to Taki and others took place over such a prolonged period of time, with Taki and others ignored, gaslit and dismissed, while Charles Brownstein and others were allowed to continue without any real oversight that I can be aware of. considering that I've been speaking to booth members, for example, that had some real future in the industry. They were wanting careers in comics, and they were effectively they had their dreams crushed by the behavior of individuals. And I mean, in one regard, one just left the industry completely. This is somebody whose family is in comics, and this person left the industry completely, and I believe is working on a farm at this point, as far away from comics as possible, purely off the back of this the actions of this individual. I think what I would want to make sure is that Charles Brownstein does not simply slink away into the shadows, as seems to be the possibility with his resignation. I want to know if there's going to be any follow-up in terms of the communication with these individuals, if there has been any conversation with them, considering that all of this has come from resurrected posts at the end of the day. And I know this one's going to be difficult. Any recrimination can be achieved in terms of the damage to reputation, to livelihoods on behalf of those people.
Mm-hmm. Here I'm going to be. I want to balance.
That was a big thing to come at you. I'm sorry.
No. Here I want to balance transparency with respect, because again, I'm usually on the other side of the table on this. I'm the outside voice. I'm the person representing the women and the person or men, and anybody. Like I said, harassment affects everybody. And if I sometimes just say women, it's a shorthand for the fact that just historically that's where this started in terms of the conversation in law. But this affects non-binary, it affects trans, it affects men, it affects everybody. And I don't want that to be overlooked. This is incredibly important to me because this is part of the reason I was just having compliant conversations about this. Part of the reason this is illegal is that it's cutting off people's futures, which is why things like restorative justice. I can tell you that has been a conversation throughout, even before my coming here, was the importance of restorative justice. Apologies. I'm a very big believer in apologies. Huge believer in apologies. A lot of lawyers.
I mean, I think that's the thing that hurt the most, is that we never even got that.
Mm-hmm. And so, I wasn't part of this, and yet I look at this and I can say, I am sorry. I am sorry that this happened to all of you. Those of you I know, those of you I don't know. I'm sorry that this has hurt the community. This never should have happened. This was wrong. And I think part of it with apologies, and I don't mean to slip onto the lawyer thing, because I can explain things, but they're never excuses, because I've worked so hard to change them. But it is a common thing in law for lawyers and law professors to say you should never apologize, because an apology can be used against you for purposes of corporate or personal liability in a lawsuit. And to that I say, well, if people apologized, if people recognized what they were doing wrong, you might not have to deal with so many lawsuits to begin with, because you'd be doing the right thing from the beginning. You'd be making things better. You'd be keeping it so people wouldn't have to go off to a farm or quit something that they love. I mean, I can name names. I've worked in this a long time, and I can tell you stories that would probably break you. There are stories here that I know that have broken a lot of people, and it's hard and it's wrong, and it's part of the reason why. And I take it very, very, very seriously. Like I said, this is not the role I usually play. I'm not speaking on behalf of the organization. I'm training it. I'm changing it. I'm working with government to come up with new systems. But in this position, I will say that as somebody who's seen the way organizations have handled it, I believe in apologies. I believe in restorative justice. I also believe that it is not the organization's place to say that to a person, hey, you went through this, but now there's a new person, and why don't you come and be our new, symbol? And no, that's not, no. I respect the people who've been through this too much. So with respect to that, I'm going to leave anything that has to do with the victims. I'm a big believer in agency and people having voices. And if people want to stay with themselves and never want to interact with us again, I get it. If people want to talk to us, I'm here. And whether it has affected you just because you've watched what has happened in horror, or whether something has happened to you that nobody knows about yet, or whether something has happened to you that people do know about, I am here to listen. I am here to talk. I am here to tell you that there is no excuse.
What's been the level of communication so far, or has your job at the moment been a case of dealing with the framework and dealing with the actual organization and working in that regard? What's been the balance between getting that in place and actually having the opening up of the dialogue with those that have been affected?
And I'm simply going to say, and this is one where, and please, this is not a matter.
This is where the legal hat comes on.
No. Actually, this is not the legal hat. This is actually not the legal hat. This is actually out of respect. I am not. I'm a big believer in personal privacy, particularly when you've been through something like this. And I'm a big believer that any conversations in that, whether they happen, whether they don't happen, whether there's outreach or there's not outreach, I think it really needs to be private. And this is not the lawyer hat. It has nothing to do with the lawyer hat. This is the human hat. This is me saying that it is not my place. It is not my place to say, oh, well, there's this person, and here's how things are. Why I'm not? It is not the organization's place to speak for that individual. Let me give you a story. You know that if you look in the history of reform of sexual harassment law, one of the things I helped do, both behind the scenes and publicly, was advocate for a number of changes, which actually got enacted in New York City, New York State, and then became models elsewhere for independent contractors and non-disclosure agreements. And with respect to non-disclosure agreements, there had been a proposal to ban non-disclosure agreements completely. And one thing I realized was that, having worked in this area, was that there are a number of victims of harassment who actually are the ones who request the non-disclosure agreements because they don't want to be stigmatized. They don't want this to be defining them for the rest of their lives. They want to be able to stay on the job if at all possible. If they have to leave or choose to leave, they want to do so under conditions where they still retain their professional identity and they're not defined by the person who was harassed by this person for the rest of their days online forever and ever. Amen. And so what I recommended was that that person have the agency. That person can request a non-disclosure agreement, and if one is there, they can choose not to follow it. That person has the voice, that person has the power. And so when it comes to transformative justice, I believe that is something that's completely the domain of the people involved. And it's just not the organization's place to say, this is how things are, or this is the conversations, unless that's something that is coming directly from those people. I believe, a big believer in the victim's voice. And again, that's not the lawyer hat, that's the human hat, because I've seen the impetus in these things is often for the organization to take control of the narrative. It's for the lawyers to take control of the narrative. And I am all about, before the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund and after the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, I am all about the victims having the voice. And so that's where I want it to be.
Understandable. I think also people are looking at the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund right now and seeing how it can go forward, and also its own, not only the relationship of the industry with the Cbldf, but also the fans and followers. We've got Into the Blue Mister saying, my faith in the Cbldf has been dented by this. Their booth at SDCC was always one of the first I would head for, because I knew there would be books signed by great creators for sale. I have swung by the Cbldf booth myself. I believe in the Cbldf, and there are people that have felt rocked by the revelations, and also the way that prior to you coming on board, how it has been. The question has to be, going forward, what do you feel can be done to repair that kind of relationship? And certainly during your tenure, what do you see that you will be doing to do so?
I teach ethics. In fact, tomorrow night, it's my first ethics class of this semester is going to start. And the way I always start my ethics class is as I talk about what ethics is. And people tend to think about ethics in terms of a set of rules for doing right and wrong, but it's actually a lot more fluid than that. One of the core things in ethics is that there's a correspondence, there's a match between what people say they are and what people actually do, to make sure that it corresponds, their words and their actions. And I think part of the reason we have this breakdown in trust is there's a sense that what the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund said it was, how it presented itself in terms of the breadth of its mission, in terms of the sort of things it did, non-disclosure agreements, all that sort of thing, they were inconsistent with what it was actually doing. We said we were for speech, we were banning people from saying certain things. That's a very fundamental rift, and you never wanted to do that, and they did that. And so I get why the trust is broken. So it's going to be, my priority is to restore the match between what we say we are and what we actually do. And that is going to take some time. And I get it. One of the first things I did, and I hope if this is not what's happened, then let me know and clean it up. But we're not doing direct fundraising outreaches right now. I said that just, let's stop that for a while. What we have to do is reestablish who we are, explain who we are, do certain things, make sure that people see that what we do matches who we are in terms of our internal reforms, in terms of policies, in terms of our procedures, in terms of our transparency, in terms of our mission, and in terms of our programs. And we just do this for a while and reestablish that trust. If your trust has been broken by this, there is nothing that I can say now that will restore it. The thing that's going to restore it, or that will try to help restore it over time, is to continue to help the comics community in the things that we're here to do, and to do that again and again and again, in new ways, in bigger ways, in ways, some of it will be quiet, because there are certain things about client confidentiality that you don't. We've actually started helping people again. There's certain things that you can't reveal just for client confidentiality. But we're going to be doing things, and I hope that you will see over time that we're back and we're better than before. But again, I know this isn't instantaneous, because it's the nature of ethics not to be instantaneous. So the best thing I can do is say to anybody, if you have any needs in this, particularly people from marginalized communities, people who are concerned about their access to the comics community, access to publishing, access to legal help, whether you're a journalist, whether you're a creator, whether you're a retailer, whether you're a consumer, and you feel like you can't get access to certain things because of certain legal problems, reach out to us and we'll see what we can do. I can tell you the one answer you're not going to receive is, well, we can't do that because we only work with the First Amendment. Because as long as I'm there, that's not going to be the answer.
So in terms of that communication, which I personally believe is the groundwork, it is the foundation to any organization. It is an open and free dialogue. Mm-hmm. Where is the best place for people to reach out to you? Is there a URL, or is there an email address that people can reach out?
You can email me directly at jeff.trexler@cbldf.org. That's jeff.trex, as in xylophone, ler@cbldf.org. Or if you don't want to go through the organizational email, and I get it, go to my other email, which is jeff.trexler@gmail.com. Happy to answer there. I also, as you know, I also interact with people on social media, particularly, if I happen to not know song lyrics, I will answer questions about that. But I will answer any questions you have. If you have any complaints, just let me know. If there are things that you think I should know that maybe I don't know yet, I want to know that. Any information, any of your concerns, any of your recommendations, send them to me. Anything you want me to pass on to the board, I will pass it on to the board. This is all about transparency. This is all about access. This is all about helping the comics community. And to do that most effectively, I definitely want to hear from you.
Thank you. We've got one more question from Omar Hassa, and then I've got a comment from Michael Dooley. We've got Omar Hassa who's asking, would you consider employing an outside review panel to rule on what, if the board is doing, is not out of line?
Yeah. One of the things that, for example, with respect to outside review panel, one way that this could be handled, it's commonly handled, is through an ethics committee that has people on it who are not either members of the fund, or they're members of the fund but not part of the board or not part of management. There are ways to bake this into the organizational infrastructure so that you always have an outside voice. Like I said, it's a role I've played, it's a role I've helped others play, and it's something that I think the Legal Defense Fund would definitely benefit from. Because remember, when I talk about the way things are traditionally done in terms of allocation and people, hire experts, or board members don't have time to look at anything. They're counting on people. That board, an effective board, is counting on people to highlight the information that they need to know. It's just that often information is not conveyed in a very effective way. So we're going to try to heighten that effectiveness. We're trying to make sure that the board has the information that it needs, and having outside voices is going to be a crucial part of that.
Right, and I'm not entirely sure about how I can put the next comment up properly, because number one, it will actually block most of our faces off.
Great.
And not only that, but the second half is really giving me due props, which I don't. I'll take, but let's see what it says. This is Michael Dooley. Thank you so much, Jeff, for all you're doing here. With all Cbldf's supremely outstanding accomplishments, your appointment should be considered one of the most important actions this organization has taken. And thank you, Leonard. This has been the absolute best of your Englishman in San Diego podcast that I've listened to. For myself, thank you very much indeed for your comments, Michael. I mean, I felt it was an important topic to talk about. It's certainly outside of my usual wheelhouse. This isn't what I usually talk about, but I felt with the opportunity to talk to Jeff, it was something that I felt needed to be discussed. And I personally hope that it has helped people understand more about the organization, about what its remit has been and what it can be, and also the future of what the Cbldf can look forward to. Is there any other last comments that you'd like to make, Jeff? Anything? I mean, certainly in terms of the future of the organization. I mean, you mentioned the short-term nature of your position. Do you have a ballpark of how long you feel that you'd be in the position?
I think it's really going to come down to what we do. So this is something that we could end up doing this for a few months, and if everything goes well, then it's just going to be time for me to go. But it's not going to go, it's not going to be going into 2022. That's definite. Maybe a bit into 2021. But we're not looking at anything really long term. The aim here is to do this as efficiently and effectively as possible. And frankly, I like making myself obsolete in these things. The idea is that you're going to be getting to a point where you're going to wonder, hey, let's move on. Let's get on to somebody else. And if that's the case, and I start hearing that, that's wonderful. That means things are going exactly the way they're supposed to be, because we have an amazing staff. We have an amazing team. We're going to, I hope, be bringing on even more amazing people, both to the board and throughout our workflow. And that it's going to be a wonderful day for me when I'm no longer needed. That really is the goal. But again, if I had any last thing, is that when I saw my email address up there, definitely take that seriously. If there's anybody who wants to reach out and say anything about the organization, what's happened, what's going to happen, anything you want me to convey to the board, I'm here and I will do that. That's my pledge to all of you, to all of the community.
Fair enough. For myself, I feel that the goal of any changes moving forward must be twofold. Number one, to restore the reputation of the CBLDF in terms not only about the behaviour of the staff, but also just the cases that it's taken on, the remit of the organisation, just to restore faith in the organisation. But I really do hope that the people that have been slighted, that have been hurt, that have been abused, that have been marginalised, I'm hoping that the actions moving forward, that the repair that is done to the organisation will allow them to sleep better at night, to come to some kind of peace with the organisation. I don't think there will ever be any kind of peace with the person that's done this, and there shouldn't be. But with the organisation, I'm hoping, if anything, bridges can be made and relationships restored. And like I say, I just hope that people who have been hurt can sleep better at night. That's because they have not been able to sleep for many years, and that's been the most painful bit of the whole thing going forward.
I share
Jeff,
that. I share that 100%, and thank you so much for saying that. I share that 100%.
Jeff, I want to say thank you very much indeed for coming on. Like I say, this has not been the usual talking. Let's put it this way: usually I'm quite grinny and happy and cracking jokes, but that's not this episode. It's not what it's been all about. But thank you very much indeed for coming on. I wish you all the best in your time with the CBLDF, and I look forward to the organisation going forward. And thank you very much indeed for coming on.
And thank you so much for having me here. And thanks to all of you for listening. And I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks again to Jeff for coming on. If you do want to reach out, his address is right there on the screen. That's not only his CBLDF address, but also his Gmail. I'm not too sure about him putting up his personal email address, but that's what he's done, and I understand that he wants any and all conversations. And of course, if you do have anything that you want to add to the conversation, put it in the comments below. I'll be monitoring any people who will be watching this after the fact, who perhaps have not watched this live, and any comments I will pass on to Jeff, of course. Thank you very much indeed for watching this particular episode of Talking Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. We're back again on Sunday talking to James Tynan IV. Looking forward to that conversation. It's going to be an interesting one. The man is on fire at the moment. He's got a book coming out called Department of Truth, which I don't know how relevant to this particular conversation, but I'll say that. The actual book itself is fantastic. The Joker War is on fire. Something is killing the children. He's an amazing writer, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. We're also going to be doing, this was arranged today, we're going to be doing a special incidental episode on Monday. We're hopefully going to be joined by some great creators who are organising a Kickstarter at the moment. And Declan Shalvey is going to be taking part in the conversation. More information about that over the course of the next couple of days. But do keep your eyes on the channel. Hit like and notify. Hit the subscribe button, and by all means, it will let you know when we do these incidental episodes, these drop-ins outside of our usual show, which is on Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. That has been our show today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you on Sunday for another Talking Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. Take care.